Hello. May I remind everyone present that this meeting will be recorded via the internet and this recording is archived for future viewing. Could all participants please mute themselves when not speaking in order to avoid any background noise or feedback when other participants are speaking? If a participant wishes to speak, please can they put their hand up if they can be seen on screen, or use the hands up or chat functions. If any participant has any difficulty hearing or being heard when they are addressing the committees, then they should let the chairman or democratic officer know. If they have a webcam, then they should try turning this off, as this will help with the broadband or Wi-Fi bandwidth, so they can at least hear and be heard. Please ensure that all debate is raised verbally and not via the chat function for the sake of the recording. The chat function may be used to highlight any technical issues and or to grab the attention of the chairman or Democratic Services officer. Just to add that I am joined by our Scrutiny Committee councillors, officers and other invited guests to assist with our discussions. I'd like to give Farida Aslam a warm welcome and say hello. And at the same time, I'd also like to bid Pam Toms farewell and good luck in the future. This is her last meeting with us, as she is retiring soon. Thank you. So, agenda 1, any apologies for absence?
Yes, we have a few, Chair. We've got apologies from Councillor Cave, Councillors Nugent Finn, Councillor Parker and Mr. Raybould from the tenant representatives.
Okay, thank you. The minutes of the meeting held, agenda item 2, minutes of the meeting held on the 10th of February 2021. Is everybody happy to accept?
Happy to accept.
Yes.
Chair,
Okay.
before we move on to the next item, with regard to the minutes, regard to the agenda item last month around the task and finish group, I just wanted to confirm to members the names of the people that have volunteered to do the task and finish group. Just to confirm to members, it will be councillors Ms J. Aviat, Mrs. Cave, Councillor Collins, Councillor Hanks, Councillor Perks, and Miss Bethan Hunt from Citizens Advice, and Ms H. Heather-Smith from the Tenant Working Group representatives.
Okay, thank you. And I've just realised that I forgot to say something when I was welcoming Farida and bidding Pam a fond farewell. I meant to say thank you very much to Sandra Perks for her work in being the previous chairman, and I really appreciate it. So thank you. Okay, so item number 3 on the agenda is declarations of interest. Do we have any?
Yes, Chair. I'd like to declare an interest in agenda items 5 and 6, please, as I'm a council tenant.
Okay, thank you. Does anybody else have their hands up? I don't see anybody else.
And
Okay.
just to confirm, Chair, that is
Yeah.
Councillor Aviat for the purpose of the minutes and recording. So
Yes, sorry, I forgot to say. Okay. So we're on to item number 4, report of the Director of Social Services, Youth Offending Service, 6-month probation report. I'd like to hand over to Paula now. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. The purpose of this report is to inform the committee of the performance of the Youth Offending Service for the period April to September 2020. The report is designed to enable elected members to have effective oversight of the performance of the Youth Offending Service. As part of its grant funding terms and conditions, we are required to report on a number of key performance indicators, as you'll see listed in the report. I'll talk you through them, hopefully briefly, from your point of view. If we look at the first-time entrance to the youth justice system, we're looking at the 12 months period from January 2019 to December 2019. And this reflects a 14.3% decrease. This is 3 young children who've entered, 3 young people less who've entered the criminal justice system, compared to figures for 2018. We had 25 compared to 28. So overall performance is positive in that area. If we compare the performance against other areas, there was a 4% decrease across South Wales and a 1.7% reduction across Wales. As I've said, performance looks quite positive in relation to first-time entrants. If we move on to reducing the number of children reoffending, the information provided in Appendix 1 shows a decrease in the binary rate, which is the number of young people reoffending. This demonstrates there were 27 reoffenders from a cohort of 63. That reduced to 21 reoffenders from a cohort of 55 when comparing January to December 2017 to January to December 2018. The percentage rate has also decreased from 42.9% to 38.2%. The reasons for this reduction are a reduction in the size of the cohort, a reduction in the number of reoffenders, and a reduction in the number of reoffences, all which is very positive. The number of reoffences committed by reoffenders has decreased actually from 159 to 61, which is over a 50% reduction. I would just add one slight caveat to that, in the fact that we had a one single young person in 2017 which committed a rather large number of reoffences. So without that person in the cohort, it does look much more positive. In relation to the frequency rate, that's the number of reoffences committed by young people who reoffend, this demonstrates a decrease as well. It's gone down from an average of 5.89 reoffences to 2.90. So this, as I said, this figure relates to the number of reoffences committed by the number of children within the cohort. So there were 21 young people committing 61 reoffences. So that takes the average number down to 2.9 reoffences per each child. And this information supports the argument that the OSS is now working with smaller numbers of children, but with more complex needs. And it does tend to create a greater volatility in the reoffending cohort. You'll note, and you'll be aware, the committee will be aware, that the performance data from the Youth Justice Board is always approximately 18 months behind. We have to allow a 12-month tracking period for the cohort, plus an additional 6 months to allow any delays in the court system. So the performance I've just mentioned to you today relates back from the period January to December 2017 compared to January to December 2018. The data is also aggregated data, which means if a young person reoffends within each quarter, they'll be counted 4 times, and then at the end of their 12 months, their 12 months reoffending will be counted 4 times. So it builds on itself, if that makes sense. Because the Youth Justice Board data is so far behind, we do have a local reoffending measure, and this looks at a cohort which is tracked from the 1st of January of each year to the 31st of March. The cohort that we've currently got at the moment is for the period January to March 2020 and ends on the 1st of April 2021. In this cohort, we have 10 children of 33 who've reoffended, committing a total of 17 offences. So this equates to a reoffending rate of 32.3% compared to the YJB's rate of 38.2%, and 1.7 reoffences per reoffending compared to YJB of 2.9%. So hopefully it's all going in the right direction. As I said, there are more detailed information in the Appendix 1 if people want to have a look at that, but it outlines the needs of some of the children that we're working with. In relation to reduction in the use of custody, we reported no custodial disposals during the period from April to September. When we compared that to the previous year, April to September 2019, there were 3 custodial disposals. What we tend to find in the Vale is that we have young people sentenced to custody when they're either really serious offences or they don't comply with court orders. When we turn now to Welsh indicators in relation to education, training and employment, this indicator reflects the number of hours that a young person has been offered provision alongside the number of hours a young person has attended that provision. The aim of having the split is to look at whether there's actually a problem with the provision as available or the young people attending it. So if we look at the data for the year to date, we can see that children of statutory school age were offered on average 10 hours at the start and review stage of their interventions and ended on an average of 8.3 hours. They actually attended that provision they were offered less than the 10 hours. They actually attended 6.7 hours at the start, 6.7 hours of review, and ended on 1.7 hours. So both the hours offered and the hours attended are below the recommended 25 hours per week for a child. This has been escalated to the strategic leadership team and to the Director of Learning and Skills. What I would add in relation to that is obviously performance in relation to access to education during the pandemic. It will be affected because a lot of the education is taking place online, and it proves challenging to monitor and measure the actual number of hours children are actually accessing the provision. If we look at children above statutory school age, that's post 16, ending an intervention in the period, they were both offered and attended 10.5 hours through the entire interventions. It's related to 2 young people. If we then move on to look at accommodation, this continues to be positive. During the 6 months period, we had 5 young people who had a closed community penalty. All 5 were in suitable accommodation on the start and end of their interventions. There were actually no children who closed a custodial penalty during that period. Moving on to substance misuse, we continue to see that the majority of children once referred tend to engage in the assessment and treatment programmes. During April to September, there were 5 young people identified who required an assessment. 2 were already in receipt of a service, 3 were referred, and 2 actually received an assessment within 5 working days. So that equated to 66%. Of those 3 children that were referred, all actually engaged in the assessment, and they have started treatment within 10 working days of the assessment. So moving on to mental health, we had 5 young people who were identified by screening as requiring a mental health assessment. All 5 were already in receipt of mental health services, which we are finding quite a lot. We've got a lot of young people involved with mental health services at the moment. If we then lastly look at victims participating in restorative justice, this is an area we previously had quite positive performance on. You'll notice being quite heavily impacted by the pandemic. 40 victims were identified from 50 interventions ending in the period, 39 of which were offered a direct or indirect restorative process. Only 1 victim took up the offer of direct reparation, with 4 receiving indirect reparation. So for us, that's basically a decline in performance, but I think that's about people not wanting to engage in face-to-face contact during this period. You'll note that the YOS focuses on the wellbeing objectives, specifically linked to deprivation for children. We were involved in an enhanced case management model, looking at the complexity of these children and how we can deal with the adverse impact of childhood experiences. Unfortunately, this funding for this project ended in March last year, and no referral has been accepted since October 2019. So unless any members have got any questions, I would ask the committee to note the content of the report.
Thank you very much for that, Paula. That was very, very informative. I do have 1 or 2 questions myself, but I think I'll open it up to the floor first, see if any of my colleagues have any questions, and then I'll answer mine. Thank you. So does anybody else have a question? Raise your hands if you do. Councillor Aviat, I believe you have a question.
Yeah, just a quick one. I'm still not sure what age range is the youth offending service for, please.
Okay. We actually work with a different range of children and young people. We offer a preventative service, which is for children who've not actually offended yet. So they maybe have displaying some traits which places them at risk of offending. And we would work with children from the age of 8 in relation to that, 8 up to 18. And when it comes to actually children who've offended, they have to be above the age of criminal responsibility. So any child who's offended would be above 10. So it's 10 to 18. And when I say 18, very complicated, the youth offending service, it depends on the type of order that a young person has. So some young people, if they were subject to a particular type of order, may remain with us until possibly approaching their 19th birthday. But we are officially, our end date is 18.
Thank you.
Do we have any other questions from anybody else on the floor? Okay, I don't see any more hands going up, so I will ask my 2 questions. In 2.26 of the executive summary, you've said that the funding for the project ended in March 2020. Can you tell me what plans you have for the future and what the next steps are? Thank you.
Yes, the actual enhanced case management model, which is the model we were operating, the funding for the youth offending service hasn't ended as a total, if that makes sense. It was a particular type of model we were operating within the service. It was funded by Welsh Government, the Police and Crime Commissioner, Public Health Wales and the Forensic Adolescent Treatment Service. That funding ended in March, as I said, because it was a pilot. Welsh Government have now produced what they're calling a Youth Justice Blueprint, and attached to that they want to promote the enhanced case management model, but at the moment they haven't identified where the funding for that is coming from, but there are work streams looking at it.
Oh, that's good news. Thank you. The other question I've got is regarding the
Sorry, I can't hear you, Councillor.
Councillor Collins, can you hear us? I think she may have dropped out for a sec. Councillor Collins, if you turn off your camera.
Okay, can you hear me now?
Yes.
Can you hear me now?
Yeah. Yes, thank you.
Brilliant,
Yes.
thank you. I do apologise. When that happens, first thing I do is switch the camera off. I do apologise. Second question I've got is regarding mental health and the effects COVID may have had on it. You mentioned you've had a few more referrals now. Have you found that the people who you've had referrals to are asking for increased support due to COVID? Maybe it's had a detrimental effect?
That's a good question. We have a mental health nurse attached to the service. So when we do our assessments, we identify if any children are in low mood or affected by any mental health conditions, etc. And we refer them into our nurses that are attached to the service. We haven't specifically measured the impact of COVID yet, but the nurse post has recently started. One of the things we're looking at is measuring the work that they're doing. So it could be something we could potentially ask the question of moving forward.
Okay, thank you, Paula. If it is something you do end up measuring, I would be very interested to know the answer and the outcome to that. That would be very, very interesting to look at. Thank you. So have we got any more questions on that item? No? Okay, well, I will say thank you very much to Paula, and we will move on to our next item.
Thank you, Chair.
Paula,
feel
free to leave if you wish.
Thank you, Chair.
Okay,
Chair,
thank
can
you.
I just confirm that we're, in terms of recommendations, we're just following the recommendations?
Oh, yes, I
and
forgot.
voting?
Sorry. It's my first time doing this. I'm a little bit nervous. I do apologise.
Oh, no worries.
Okay, so I will ask that we note the recommendations. Is everyone agreed?
Happy to note them, yes.
Okay,
Yeah.
thank you.
Yeah, happy.
Yeah, wonderful. Recommendations are noted. Thank you. So item number 5, I believe the revenue and capital reports are Laura. So over to you, please, Laura. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. So revenue and capital budget monitoring for the period April 2020 to the end of January 2021. Members are aware that this year has been a challenging year for services, both operationally and financially, due to the pandemic, but Welsh Government have provided financial assistance by way of hardship funding for additional costs caused by the pandemic, and also via claims for lost income suffered by the authority as a consequence of COVID. And this funding has meant that most of our services within this committee's remit should now outturn on target within budget. The report does, however, outline 2 services which are not anticipated to achieve a balanced budget. The youth offending service are expected to be £150,000 below budget due to staff vacancies. And the private housing budget is forecasting that it will need to draw down £250,000 from the Welfare Reform Reserve to cover an adverse variance of that amount, as the migration of the housing benefit claim system to universal credit has meant that the subsidy income that the service has previously received on its overpayments have reduced. In addition, as has previously been stated at committee, the proposed saving on CCTV will not be achieved this year, and would need to be drawn down from reserves if it cannot be covered elsewhere within the council fund housing budget. As for capital budgets, the full list of projects are listed in Appendix 1, along with actual costs and progress notes. There are 2 new projects included in the appendix, a £20,000 grant from Natural Resources Wales to create an education centre in the Everyone's Garden, and a £573,000 grant to continue the work on the Penarth Older Persons Housing with Care Complex, which has been offered by Welsh Government and now formally accepted. Terms of this Welsh Government grant state the funding must be spent by the 31st of March, i.e. the end of this month, and it is recommended that committee consider the position of the revenue and capital budgets. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much, Laura. Does anybody have any questions? Okay, I don't see anybody with their hands up, so I will just say that ask that we note the report. Everybody happy with that? Yes?
Yes, happy to note the reports. Thank you.
Thank
Chair.
you.
Thank you.
Okay, so thank you, Laura.
Thank you very much.
You don't have to stick around now if you don't want to.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thanks.
Bye. Okay, so item number 6 is the interim report on the development of the new tenant and leaseholder engagement strategy. Now, I'm not sure whether it's Pam or Farida going to be telling us about this, so just let me know.
I think I'm speaking on behalf of the housing section in relation to this. So
Okay, go ahead, Farida. Thank you.
That's lovely. The purpose of the report is to examine the progress of the new tenant engagement strategy and the emerging themes that will be included in the next strategy. In summary, then, the report will look to update you on the developments of the new strategy, the research that we've done to date, both internally and externally, and also the best practice that we're drawing on. The recommendation is that the committee note the timetable for the delivery of the new strategy and the consultation process, and examine the emerging themes. So just in terms of some background, the previous tenants engagement strategy was approved in Cabinet in 2018. And this incorporated feedback from this scrutiny committee, and subsequently we have provided regular updates to this committee on the progress of the strategy. So just a reminder in terms of what the tenant participation strategy included, it had 4 themes within it. The first theme of the strategy was about integrating the tenant's voice into making decisions within the housing team and directorate. The second theme was about adapting our tenant engagement approach to make sure that it's inclusive and everybody is involved should they wish to be. So breaking down them barriers. The third theme was about capacity building, ensuring that those people that actually want to get involved in tenant participation activity, making sure that we're actually supporting them and building their capacity to have their voice and the confidence to have their say. And the last theme of that strategy was to listen and learn from the feedback. So seeking the feedback and then driving improvements on the feedback that had been provided. And since that strategy in 2018, there's been a significant amount of progress that has been made. And I'm going to touch on the various elements under the 4 themes. So firstly, there has been a considerable amount of work that has been undertaken by the Quality Design Forum and the working groups. These groups are made up of tenants from various tenant groups who regularly provide feedback to council officers on a whole range of policies, service changes, and provide a positive challenge, if you like, ensuring any proposed changes to service areas are viewed from the tenant's perspective. Secondly, quite a bit of work has been done in relation to sustaining and strengthening the formal tenants and residents association groups. And our tenants and residents association groups are basically the bedrock of our tenant involvement structure. And volunteers volunteer up to 100 hours over the course of the year, each year, making a positive difference to the communities that they live in. But in addition to this, we've also done quite a lot of work in expanding our outreach, which includes estate action days, road shows. And over the course of the 3 years, we've delivered 19 community events and managed to engage over 2,500 tenants in these events. So that takes us to about 60% of the tenant population. In addition to this, our Vale Homes team, community investment team, not only support the tenant and residents group working alongside the TPO officer, we also work alongside communities to develop wider community groups. And this is, as I say, it's in addition to the residents groups, and this forms part of informal consultation and does quite a lot to promote better health and well-being, to allow residents' voice to be heard. Coupled with this, we've also scaled up tenants volunteering through our time banking initiative. And since we've launched the time banking initiative, we've engaged with 570 tenants who are actively participating in our time banking project, and ultimately have actually given up 5,387 hours of their own time to volunteer in the community. In addition, one of the themes was about building capacity within the strategy. And as part of that, our Vale employability program called Opportunity Knocks has helped tenants that are furthest away from the labour market to find jobs. And as a result of over the course of 3 years, we've supported around 110 people into employment and managed to assist residents with gaining 961 accredited qualifications. In addition to all of this engagement, we have undertaken 2 large-scale tenant satisfaction surveys since the inception of our last strategy. And in the last satisfaction survey, we actually had 1,300 tenants responding to the survey. And as I say, that forms a large percentage of our formal involvement. And this feedback from this satisfaction survey has actually driven improvements in service areas. So that was a review in terms of the 2018 strategy. I'll move on to the issues that I'd like to draw your attention to. So firstly, over the last 9 months, the Vale housing staff have been working on developing the new tenant and leaseholder strategy. There's been quite a considerable amount of work going on in the background, and we have initiated a series of SWOT analysis with staff members and tenants to analyse where our strengths are, where our weaknesses are, where the opportunities are, and also where the threats are. One thing that's actually come to light is the threat of not being able to engage with our tenants digitally is a real issue, especially with the pandemic. We have been unable to deliver face-to-face meetings with our tenants, but we certainly need to learn the lessons from that and undertake some form of digital inclusion and digital engagement with our tenants. In addition to that, our star satisfaction survey, which is the large-scale tenant satisfaction survey I referred to before, that's provided us with really valuable insight. And 23% of our residents that responded said that keeping tenants informed should be a priority for us. And equally, 21% said that it was important that we listened and acted on residents' views. And I think these will be 2 core drivers for the new tenants and leaseholder strategy going forward. just in terms of analysing the active tenants that we've currently got, tenants who are on the Tenants and Residents Association give on average 6 hours per month contributing to their local groups. The active tenants that we have involved in our work currently have been with us for a long time, and that says something about the organisation's ability to retain volunteers and tenants that are willing to be involved. However, we do recognise that there is some work to do in terms of bringing in a younger cohort of people and getting them to influence decisions. What we have found is that when we conducted some research with our current engaged tenants in trying to establish whether they were using the internet and had the ICT skills required to continue to digitally engage, or to start digitally engage with us rather, we found that the majority of tenants that are active do have access to the internet and have got the skills required, but they would benefit from some training. So in terms of emerging themes, we've got 13 active residents groups, and I think the details of these residents groups were sent in an email earlier today. What we find is that there is an opportunity, as I've already said, to engage with a younger cohort, but I think the digital infrastructure that we now develop, it is likely that we will be able to be in a position to offer more flexible ways of tenants getting involved, so they can dip in and out of involvement. We have piloted a new scrutiny panel, which consists of 3 tenants at the moment. And part of this service would be to get our scrutiny panel residents to actually assess the current services within housing and building services. And that might be looking at, say, for example, gas repairs. How long, that might be looking at gas servicing. How long does it take? Our current service quality assessors have just gone through a process whereby they have just reviewed our current tenant handbook and provided a tenant's perspective on what needs to be included within that tenant handbook. Finally, there's a formal consultation that already takes place with leaseholders. However, we do feel that there is need for perhaps more support structures, engagement structures for the leaseholder cohorts. And as part of the new strategy, it's likely that we will be looking to introduce a specialist leaseholder forum. So that basically provides you a little bit of an overview of the background, what we found, and where we're likely to be heading. In terms of the next steps then, the tenant and leaseholder strategy is likely to be submitted to the Scrutiny Committee for consideration and comment in August later this year. The draft will then undergo further consultation with residents via the council website, and will also use the Gov delivery platform to give tenants and leaseholders the opportunity to have their say before the strategy is finalised. I think that provides a basic overview of the report, and I'm happy to take any questions in relation to that.
Thank you very much for that, Farida. I do have one question, but I will send it out to the floor first. And I can see already that Heather Smith has her hand up. So if you would like to ask your question, please, Heather.
Heather, you're on mute.
Heather, you're muted.
Right, can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you now, Heather.
Sorry, thank you very much. I go back to the question 1.3.5. and it's on time banking. Now, our group, we've done a load of things with the children and youth about picking up rubbish, and we cleaned all the book, and I've got the tickets, and it's spending the tickets because they only allow 4 people to go to any one structure. Well, I got 15 kids, and they all want to go to the same thing. And now I've heard that it's all gone digital. So how do we get involved in that? I am being informed as a resident board person. So how do we go about that and getting involved that way?
Thank you, Heather. That's something that I can take back for you, and I can come back to you with an answer in relation to that. I'm not sure. I'm not sure what the answer is at this point in time, but I'm certain that, you know, I'll go back to Mark, and he leads on this work,
Right.
and I can come back to you directly.
Right, thank you very much, Jen. I'll expect to see you soon then.
Thank you.
So Sandra is the next person I've got with their hand up. So Councillor Perks, please go ahead.
Thank you. It's again about 1.35. I just wondered if you're able to give us a breakdown of where the actual tenants live who've been volunteering. You know, which wards are they particularly come from, and do you have targets to actually engage with the tenants from, you know, various wards? What would the numbers be that you'd want to engage with? Thank you.
Thank you. We did do an update report, and I think that was in December, and them kind of details would be covered in that report. So what we can do is we can go back and have a look at them and come back to you. In terms of the time banking program itself, we have had a year, an unprecedented year, where we haven't been able to deliver volunteering, and or residents haven't been able to take advantage of the time credits because we've been in lockdown. So our time banking project is on pause at the moment until things get back to normal. And until people can start actively volunteering in the community and also actually spending the time credits. So in time, we will have some targets that we can report back to you. But at this point in time, the project is in effect on pause because of the situation that we are in.
Okay, thank you. I suppose it was more to do with what tenants you have from what particular wards, just to see how the spread of that is really, rather than whether they've actually done, you know, the time banking, because obviously the last year they can't have, but what the actual where they live.
I can certainly take that back and have a look through the system, speaking to my colleague, and come back to you in relation to that.
Thank you very much.
Okay, thank you very much. But Heather, if you could please mute yourself. Right. I can see Gina has her hand up, but I just want to check something with Mike Ingram first. I can see you put your hand up and then you took it down again. Do you want to speak?
Thank you, Chair. I just wanted to clarify perhaps a couple of points in terms of time banking. Yes, we do have outputs that we measure in relation to time banking, both in terms of numbers and outcomes that we look to measure. So, for example, improvements in self-esteem and some of those much more, as I say, outcomes, as well as some of the outputs. In terms of ward breakdown, in terms of who volunteers, I'm sure that would be information that we'd be able to provide. We don't routinely collate it at the moment. But as you're aware, there is a later report on the agenda which talks about digital volunteering, and that specifically will be more targeted, and perhaps we'll have some discussion on that report around some of the targeting of the time banking activity that we're looking to do. And I just wanted to pick up on Heather's point, if I may, Chair. The digital volunteering isn't an end to time banking. It isn't an all or one or other. what we've found, Heather, is that during the last 12 months, a lot of our activity has been online, and obviously we've identified a number of people that we didn't even know that were vulnerable necessarily and needed help and support. And through the Help for Heroes scheme, that the successful scheme that the council were running, we've identified a number of people who tend not to get out and about as frequently as others, but would still benefit from that sort of ongoing support over the telephone, or through digital means, through Facebook and these types of activities. But we've identified a gap. So the digital volunteering is a gap in the service. I am sure that as we return to some form of normality, the type of work that you mentioned, the stuff around the estates, the environmental works that have been really, really successful for us, both in terms of building self-esteem and as you say, working with youth and some of the young people, working in their areas and therefore improving their own environments, and less likely that those environments then become vandalised and damaged, because it's the kids on those estates that are actually contributing to their area. Those things will continue. It's just that they probably won't continue in the same ways as soon as perhaps us looking at a different way. So as I say, there is a report later on the agenda which will cover off the digital side of things. And at some stage, we will speak to yourselves and all the residents groups about how we can tinker with the system that we have at the moment to make it more useful to everyone. Thank you, Chair.
Okay, thank you, Mike. I've got Gina next, and I think Heather wants to come back as well.
No, I'm all right, thanks.
Oh, okay, Gina next then. Heather, can you mute yourself, please?
I think I am now. Muted now, ma'am.
Hello.
And Mike. Okay, Gina, are you ready?
I am. Can you hear me?
Yes, I can hear you. Go ahead. Thank you.
Right, thank you, Chair. Please, can you give me any idea when the residents meeting hub place in Penarth might open again? Do you think it will be this year? Or do you think it's going to go a little bit further on? Because we're missing it terribly.
You have my sympathies there.
Honestly speaking, I have absolutely no idea. What I would say is that recent news has highlighted the fact that we are likely to have another pandemic or another outbreak of COVID, another spike. So it's really difficult. I don't know whether Mike or Nick can add anything further.
Chair, I know that in terms of the hub, Gina, clearly you can't social distance very effectively in the hub building, unfortunately. I think what we will probably do now that the weather is starting to improve and we're starting to move through spring and into the summer, it may well be, given the location of the hub and the area of land outside of the hub, it may well be that we will be able to put some form of gazebo up or some structure which enable obviously a social distancing to take place. And I think that's what we would probably like to do at the hub. Just so that, as you say, people who have been stuck indoors, haven't they, for an awful long time, I'm sure would like to get out and about in that sort of setting. And obviously we need to do that as safely as possible. But I'm sure some form of external structure, particularly on that green area in front of the, in the parking area there in front of the hub, is something that we would want to explore.
Thank you.
Okay, does anybody else have any questions before I ask mine? Okay, I don't see anyone else's hand up. Okay, I literally just have the one question, and that's you mentioned earlier you're trying to appeal to a younger cohort. Now, I was just wondering, apart from the digital inclusion plans, what else? What other methods are you looking at investigating, I should say?
So, as part of our review, we've had a look at the various projects that we do deliver. And I think what we found is we do a number of projects with a whole range of people from varying ages. And I think we just need to make them connections. So if somebody is engaged in, for example, gaining a qualification, we need to promote the engagement opportunities. Now, the current engagement opportunities are require more long-standing commitment, whereby you're expected to attend a number of meetings. Now, going forward, we will be producing a menu of opportunities where people can dip in and dip out. So family members who have got time constraints might be able to kind of dip in when they feel like it. So a lot of this will come out in the new strategy, because these are the discussions that are going on in the background at the moment.
Just to give you some clue.
Thank you very much for that, Farida. Gina, if you could just mute yourself as well, please. But thank you very much for that, Farida, and I'm looking forward to hearing more about that as and when it happens. Okay, has anybody else got any questions?
I think Chair Nick was wanting to join, just interject there. Is that right, Nick?
Oh, sorry,
Yeah.
I missed that. Go ahead.
Oh. Thanks, Chair. It was just to sort of add, really, to give a bit of a flavour of some of the activities that have been quite popular in the past. And thinking of young people specifically around sport, where we've linked in with Cardiff City, and some of the football training groups have been extremely popular. We've run football events at Gibbons and also up at Calcott, things like the cycle schemes for young people as well. And we found very much, really, by tapping into young people and children, we can make the links with parents as well. So it's, as Farida was sort of saying, really, it's moving away from maybe some of the more formal tenants association type of structures, but also building alongside things like sport and leisure type of activities in different areas. I know in other areas, things like environmental stuff around litter picking and cleanups has been extremely popular. And in other places, befriending and sort of peer support sort of networks as well. So a huge variety of different ways, really, and tapping into what interests people in local areas, and very much responding to what people tell us, really. So yeah, hence the logic behind this sort of dip in and dip out sort of approach, really, which Farida's highlighted.
Okay, thank you. Now I will point out. Oh, hang on, I'm getting some feedback from somewhere. Not sure who that is.
Is that
right,
better,
may have been Nick. Yes. No worries. I would just like to point out that we don't have a meeting in August, as that is the summer recess. So maybe September or July would be the best time for one of those, for that update to come to us. I just want to move the recommendation, if anybody is happy to go, if everybody is happy with that. I can see a few nods.
Happy with the recommendation, Chair.
Thank you very much. Thank you. So agenda item, sorry, agenda item 7. Digital engagement and volunteering officer. Now, again, it's either Pam or Farida, so who is taking the lead on this one? Thank you.
It's Farida again, Chair. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Go ahead, Farida.
Thank you. Thank you. Apologies. I think I was on mute there for a moment.
It's easy done.
That's lovely. Okay, so the purpose of the report, the Digital Engagement and the Volunteering Officer, is to examine how the Welsh Government
I think Farida's froze for a minute. Farida, if you can hear us, if you turn off your camera, you might be better in terms of audio.
Digital engagement volunteering posts can move levels of digital engagement and volunteering.
Sorry, Frida, you've frozen again. Can you hear us?
Hello.
Hi, Frida, can you hear us?
Hello.
Is that you, Frida?
It is me. Yes. Sorry, I think I was having connections
Rita?
issues. Yes. Can you hear
Okay.
me?
I
Can
can.
I'll turn off my video and start again. I'm not sure quite where you what you heard. Should I take
Sorry.
it from the top again?
If you could take it from the top, that would be good, because we only heard a couple of words, but before everything froze. Thank you very
Okay.
much.
Can you hear me? I'm having difficulty hearing you.
I can hear
you now.
Okay, so I'll give it another go. So the purpose of this
Thank you.
second report is to how the Welsh Government, Public Health Wales digital engagement and volunteering post can improve levels of digital engagement and volunteering within the Vale. In summary, the report touches on how the Welsh Government's Early Year Prevention Fund will be used to employ a dedicated individual to develop a bespoke project on behalf of the Public Service Board to expand, support and assist in increasing volunteering to address and reduce social inequalities, which includes health and social inequalities, which include social isolation, loneliness, using the lessons learned from the pandemic through the lens of digital volunteering. The recommendation is that we examine how the post will and can improve levels of digital engagement and volunteering. So I think I'll touch on the background as to where this has come from. So we've mentioned time banking a couple of times tonight, and this project relates to the time banking project. So the Vale time banking project was approved by Cabinet in October 2017. It was an innovative approach to volunteering, and the project was able to demonstrate impact on increasing tenant confidence, developing skills, and also developing community resilience. The project partnered with an organisation called Tempo. It was a social enterprise, and Tempo have a proven track record of providing support to develop the infrastructure to deliver time banking in local areas and administer a time banking currency whilst accessing a range of network providers where that currency can be spent. Update reports were made to this scrutiny group in June 2018, December 2018, and also more recently last year in September 2019. And the successes of the time banking project were discussed at a Public Service Board level. Can everybody still hear me?
Yes, I can hear you.
Perfect.
Yeah.
Partners recognise the potential benefit of time banking and also the impact that it was having on communities in reducing social isolation and improving health, addressing loneliness as well. As I say, the Public Service Board were impressed. And they saw a link between what we were doing with the time banking project and the focus of Public Health Wales and their need to do some work on tackling the wider health inequalities. So as a result of them initial discussions, funding was secured via the Public Service Board through the Early Years Prevention Fund to fund a officer to take forward a time banking, let's say time banking expansion project, which would have been offered in areas in which time banking wasn't operating. Just to take you back a little, time banking has traditionally operated and has assisted council tenants, and it's not been available to non-council tenants. So this opportunity provided us a way in which we could expand the project to non-council tenants that perhaps wouldn't take part in volunteering, learning the lessons of the time banking project. In a post-COVID world, what we've learned is that the traditional time banking model, where face-to-face volunteering was being undertaken, it's no longer feasible to do that in this current climate. And therefore, whilst we had secured the funding, there was need to develop some further thinking around some of the lessons learned from the pandemic and how we take this potential post forward. So it was no longer feasible to deliver it from a face-to-face perspective, and time banking therefore project will be delivered from a digital approach. And so this might mean recruiting volunteers who can offer their time online to others via supporting them through befriending, perhaps providing telephone advice. We saw in the pandemic there were a whole range of initiatives. Let's say, for example, an example would be where communities were getting together and offering yoga lessons. So it's using that digital model and taking this new time banking digital approach forward. So the recruitment of a digital officer to take forward this expansion project is what is envisaged. Cabinet approved the post for this digital engagement volunteer, and we are now in the process of starting the recruitment. In terms of the issues for consideration today, the future priorities of this project are, there is an intention to refocus the project to focus on health and well-being, specifically to address the health inequalities, because this post is of course being funded by Public Health Wales, and they will be looking to track the outcomes from a health and well-being perspective. But also looking at the pressures on social services, this project will also link in with that. And I've already mentioned the research that we've done to date on the time banking project has demonstrated clearly the improved physical and mental well-being effects that has had on service users. So over the next 12 months, we'll also look to build on the social prescribing work that has been undertaken in Barry, working closely with the wellbeing coaches and expanding the wellbeing services from a digital perspective. Whilst we are talking quite a lot in terms of this project being delivered from a digital perspective, that is the aim at this point in time because of where we are in relation to the pandemic and the fact that we are in lockdown. As things change, it's likely that this project will be a digital and face-to-face mix if circumstances allow. I think that provides an overview of what we're looking to do in the coming weeks and months. Another thing to add is that this project is for 12 months and is likely to start in the next 2 months. So that's it for me. I'm happy to take any questions.
Okay, thank you. Again.
Sorry, Chair, your camera's frozen. Can you hear us?
Yeah, can you hear me?
Yeah, we can now, Chair.
Oh, good. Julie, I can see, has got her hand up. If you could ask your question, please, Councillor Aviat.
Yes, thank you. It's about the time banking again, and the Public Services Board are going to fund it for a year. Is that right? And then, is any of it coming out of the housing budget? Are the council tenants going to be paid for the time banking out of the housing, and the Public Services Board do all the rest, or is Public Services Board going to pay for everything? Thank you.
So I'm happy to take that. So the current Public Service Board project is funding the expansion of the scheme into an area where there are no council tenants and or a limited number of council tenants, but where there are indicators of high health need and in lower super output areas. So we haven't decided the area just yet. This project will be for non-council tenants, and our internal project that we have funded to date for council tenants will be continued to be supported, although it is difficult to deliver a time banking project in the traditional form because the situation doesn't allow us. A time banking and a form of volunteering going forward will be included in our 3-year strategy, which we will be looking to develop in the coming weeks and months. I hope that adds.
Yep, yeah, that's fine. Thank you very much. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much. I don't see any other hands up. And I can't see everybody on screen. I can only see 6 of you on screen at the moment. So I'm assuming we have no more questions. Sorry?
No, sorry, Chair. I was just going to say there's nothing in the chat as well, just to let you know. No questions in the chat.
I got my camera off just to try and get a better sound quality.
Yeah, same here. Same here, Councillor Bird. Were you wanting to speak, Councillor Bird?
No. Happy with that.
Okay. Associated now with tenants, and I've had several of them come up to me because they've heard about the time banking project and have asked when it would be available to them. So
sorry, Chair, you broke up at the beginning. Okay. Yeah, I lost you at the beginning, so missed part of the question. Sorry, Chair, just might be worth restarting. Okay. Apologies for that.
Yeah, no worries. As I was saying, it's not really a question, more something that I need to say. In my ward, there are a lot of Newydd tenants, housing association tenants, who have heard about the time banking scheme from friends and family, and they are very keen to get involved themselves. So if we could just be told when this will be extended, if it's possible, I can let them know then. Thank you. That's all I wanted to ask, basically. So thanks.
Yes, certainly we can keep the committee informed as to when this project goes live, and there will be some information on the website reflecting this.
Quickly as well to Pam Thomas, if she is still here. Thank you very much for your hard work during the last 4 years. I've been on this committee since 2017, and your work has been really exceptional, and you've worked hard. So thank you very, very much, Pam. You'll be missed.
Thank you very much. It's really kind of you. Thank you. I appreciate that very much.
No worries. If we were in the office now, I'd be sending a bunch of flowers over to you.
Thank you.
But unfortunately, I can't do that now. So I'm just going to move the recommendation if everybody is happy with that. I see a load of nods. I'm assuming everybody is happy. Yes. Okay. Thank you very much. So the next item, sorry, is the annual delivery plan monitoring report Q3 performance 2020 to 21. I've got Mike and Miles down for this one, so who is going to be taking the lead on this?
I'm happy to start, Chair, if that's okay. Everyone can hear me?
Miles, go ahead.
So I've got two very detailed reports to go through now. What I'll try and do is make sense of them all for you, because there's a hell of a lot of paperwork there, and I can imagine it's difficult to get your head around it all. So I'll try and make some sense of it. So the first one is the third quarter report, and we're asking members to endorse the actions that we're looking to put in place to deal with underperformance and to agree the actual performance arrangements. And before I start, if I just explain a little bit about the council's governance arrangements so that everyone knows what we're talking about here. Like most businesses, the council has a business plan, and in our case it's called the corporate plan. The corporate plan in our case runs from 2020 to 25, so it's a 5-year planning document. And what we use to judge our performance against that plan is the annual delivery plan. Now, the annual delivery plan is as it says, it's a yearly plan aimed at achieving the objectives and aims in the corporate plan. So you can see the hierarchy developing. In terms of the annual delivery plan, we have a number of service plans that feed into that. The service plans essentially plans that Mike would have and Dave Holland would have. They're directorate plans aimed at achieving their responsible items within the corporate plan. And we judge how we actually achieve these by two measures. One is called performance indicators or measures, and the other is actions. So essentially what you'll see is an assessment at the third quarter of how we've done on a range of measures and a range of actions. So it's all very complicated. It sounds, but it's actually, when you break it down, it's not that difficult. But what you're seeing is documents for the entire council, which does make it quite a heavy read. So if I take you through the report and the items I think are headlines, and then we'll take any questions at the end. Firstly, this third quarter is from the 1st of April 2020 to the 31st of December 2020, smack in the middle of the pandemic. I must firstly say that the council as a whole has performed at amber status. Now we have 3 status, green, amber, red. Red's underperforming, amber means on target, and green means we've hit the target. So to be on amber as a council in the middle of a pandemic, I think is really, really positive for the council as a whole. So in terms of the whole council, 70%, that's 161 of 231 of our planned actions are green, and 24%, 55 of those actions are red. And of those 55, 50 of those are attributed to issues relating to the pandemic. So it just shows how positive we would have been if it wasn't for the pandemic. So just to reiterate, of the 55 that are failing as red, 50 of those we are saying are directly related to the issues as a result of the pandemic. Of the 64 quarterly performance measures, now these are the performance indicators I mentioned. Data was provided for 38 of those measures, with 26 of those green, 3 amber and 9 red. Now many of these measures are reported annually, so there's quite a lot to come in the last quarter and a lot of work for us officers to do, but still at this time in the process we're doing particularly well. In terms of this committee, 36 of the planned actions are attributable to it, and 69%, that's 25 of the 36 are green, and 11 are red, and 9 of the 11 are due to COVID. And we have 7 quarterly measures in this committee, 5 are green and 2 are red. So in terms of the red ones, and I know these both will be close to the committee's heart, the 2 reds are the percentage of households successfully prevented from becoming homeless. We've just missed our target for that one, which when you imagine, and I'll take you into some details a bit later of how many people we are looking to prevent from being homeless, you can see why we've only just missed it. And the other one where we're red is average number of days to deliver a disabled facility grant. And the main problem with that is we can't gain access to people's homes. So even though we've got 2 really important reds there, it's understandable why we've not been able to achieve anything higher. Completely. So Appendix A of the document is the council's full performance against the delivery plan commitments. So you were asked as a committee to comment on the entire document, but more specifically onto the items that relate to this committee and in its remit. So Appendix A is the full council document. Section 1 of Appendix A is the overall red, amber, green status, and sections 2 to 5 provides an overview of progress against our 4 wellbeing objectives, and that shows it as a council we're amber. Now the main document I want members to look at this evening is Appendix B, which is a rather colourful little PowerPoint presentation. which shows the key achievements and challenges for the committee, including a coronavirus recovery update. Now, the measures here and the actions relate to this committee specifically. So page 2 of that document, Appendix B, which is the colourful document, the appendix, is a summary showing the amber performance for this committee in tablature form. I just shows you where we are. I'll take you through a few highlights now for some of the other pages. Page 3 of the summary shows a snapshot of achievements for each of our wellbeing objectives. If I just highlight a few of these, firstly related to objective 3, 2 successful bids were made for funding to develop 11 units of modular housing on the Court Road Civic Amenity site, a self-contained temporary accommodation for homeless clients to move on from bed and breakfast rooms in hotels. So I hope members have seen that development springing up. Really impressive the speed in which it's actually it's come to the situation it's in now. And I'd like to put specific thanks to Andrew Freegard, who has come to this committee, who is our development manager, who is an excellent appointment and doing really well in that role. And also to mention Brecon Court. And I remember meeting residents of Brecon Court some 10 years ago with them saying to me that nothing will ever happen. The manager before me met them 10 years previous. It's always going to be the same. And now we have a fantastic development at Brecon Court. And every single property within that development has a resident in it. And then Homeview Phase 1 is nearing completion and should be ready for occupation by the 31st of March. So you can see, yes, we're in the middle of a pandemic, but it didn't stop the actual development of properties and our wish to build more properties for particularly those who are most vulnerable. Page 4 of the report shows a summary of our performance for this committee, mentioned earlier. This is our actions and performance measures. And then page 5 shows some areas where we need to improve. And I'll highlight a few areas here. Objective 1, and you just heard about this, development of the tenant and leaseholder engagement strategy. So that's been a bit slowed by the pandemic, so now we're making decent progress on that. And we hope to conclude it and report to Cabinet shortly. And objective 4, the ongoing restrictions resulting from the pandemic preventing officers from visiting households to process disabled facilities grants, which I mentioned previously. That is a problem for us, but because of the pandemic, there's not much we can do about that. Pages 6, 7 and 8 detail our coronavirus recovery plans, and there's a hell of a lot of bullet points in that. We'll take questions on any that you'd like to raise, but if I just take you through a few, and testament to my housing colleagues here, because I think they've done some fantastic work, particularly with our homeless clients. So we continue to provide bed and breakfast accommodation for homeless persons in accordance with our new duty under the Welsh Government COVID-19 homelessness plan. 116 hotel rooms are now block booked, and we have 89 currently occupied. And so far, we've had 385 people go through that process since March 2020. So the work that is involved in that is absolutely fantastic. And I know that Pam doesn't take praise very well, but her and her officers deserve some massive praise, and Mike also for that. The fact that they've done so well in terms of homelessness. A big concern for us has been the social effects of the lockdown. We continue to work with partners to address and improve issues of social cohesion. And sadly, a total of 63 properties have had to be target hardened to date in 2020-21 as part of our work to address domestic violence. 21 evaluations have been completed, with all 21 clients reporting that it made them feel safer and very happy with the service. So unfortunately, because people are locked in their homes more than they would be, we're seeing some knock-on effects with things like domestic violence. The referrals have increased steadily throughout the year, and the service has received positive comments from partner agencies. So the fact that we've got the dark set up, as you've probably had a presentation on previously, which is one step before it gets serious and very serious in terms of domestic violence, we're intervening at the right stage, and we're having really good outcomes as a result of that. The antisocial behaviour team has worked through over 4,000 antisocial behaviour incidents to date, generating in over 1,000 referrals. Many of the incidents relating to environmental COVID breaches, but also a lot generated from people being allowed out after the first lockdown. And we all remember the scenes at Ogmore last summer. So that team at Safer Vale have been extremely busy and remain so, and we're working every weekend to try and keep our residents safe in our resort areas. So that's an overview of where we are generally in terms of recovery. There's a lot more bullet points there, but I don't want to keep you too long. Appendix C shows all the actions and performance measures relevant to this committee that have been attributed a red status and shows the actions proposed to improve the situation. So we're not just satisfied with the fact that we're not performing particularly well in all areas. We have mitigation in place, and we are aiming to improve, even though we're trying to do so in the middle of a pandemic. Appendix 1 and 2 then show the full list of actions and performance measures for the annual delivery plan, showing the relevant committee for each. So to conclude, members are asked to consider the performance results and progress being made, noting the remedial actions being taken to address areas of underperformance, and you've been asked to note the progress made through the recovery strategy and directorate recovery plans in response to the ongoing pandemic. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. I'm just wondering if Mike has anything to add to that.
Nothing specifically, Chair, but you'll see from the, as Miles mentioned, there's an awful lot of information in this report and the later report which covers the service area. I think we could probably talk for the next 2 or 3 hours on the report. So I haven't anything specifically to raise, other than and I know this committee has thanked our staff previously in terms of their contributions over the last 12 months. I suppose just an update on the homelessness position. Obviously, that was the position in December. The position is slightly worsening, has slightly worsened over the last couple of weeks to a point where over the weekend, I think all of our B&B was almost occupied. It's improved over the last few days as we've moved people through the system. So we've probably got about half a dozen vacancies at the moment. But we are seeing a second wave of presentations to us. And going back to the point I think Miles raised as to one of the red actions in relation to homelessness prevention, I suppose the issue that we have is that we're dealing with unprecedented numbers of applications. We're dealing against difficulties in finding appropriate move-on accommodation for the numbers of people that we have in that accommodation. And whilst we are, in terms of the success of prevention up to the end of the third quarter, which is still at about 70+%, I think the figure was. Clearly it's an area that we want to keep an eye on and we want to improve. And certainly the work of the Task and Finish group, I think, will assist us greatly in terms of moving that discussion forward over the coming months. Thank you, Chair.
Go ahead and ask your question.
Sorry, Chair, were you calling me and I didn't catch that?
Oh, sorry. Did it break up again? I do apologise. I was calling you. I was asking if you would like to go ahead and ask your question. I do apologise. Okay. Internet signal isn't great tonight.
Okay, no problem. Thank you, Miles and Mike, for that for the report and the presentation. I think it is a testament, because it's been a year like I don't think any of us have ever experienced, and hopefully we never will again. And it's still ongoing. At the moment, there is no end date in sight. Vaccination is rolling out, but obviously there's lots of issues, and you just mentioned there's been a rise in homelessness as well, which is no great surprise, sadly. But my question is actually going to be around the DFGs, the Disabled Facilities Grants. Obviously, for obvious reasons, you can't go into the house at the moment, can't carry out sort of repairs, and people, and as well, even though you've got precautions in place and all those measures with PPE, people are obviously understandably nervous because some of these are some of our most vulnerable residents in the community. So is is there some sort of plan? Because obviously, as time goes on and things do improve eventually, there's going to be a deluge of everybody wanting these works done, repairs, disabled facility grants. So I just wondered if you've got some sort of framework, how you're actually going to be able to cope with that, really.
Is it okay, Chair, if I answer that question?
Yeah.
Okay, thank you. Yeah, it's a really okay. Thank you, Chair. It's a really good point. And actually, there's there are a couple of issues around this which I'm not going to be able to give a very good answer to, because the first issue is obviously disabled facilities grants are done on a framework agreement with contractors, and part of the reason we've fallen behind is that although the contractors initially weren't working, they have come back to work and have been willing to do the work, but unfortunately residents quite understandably haven't wanted contractors in their houses, so that has held up on quite a considerable number. The second reason for delay is in relation to referrals from our occupational health colleagues who work for the social services team. Those have actually been delayed due to the demand that's been placed upon all sorts of their time. Basically, they don't just do occupational health referral for the disabled facilities grant. They're doing it for lots of different areas, and their time has been taken up during the course of this with a lot of other calls as well. And then finally, obviously, there is the issue around currently there are quite a high number of cases when they get to the disabled facilities team. They are deemed to be not suitable for disabled facilities grants because of the means testing and the means assessment, which takes them out of the system. So there will, if we were in the current status quo, you're quite right, Councillor Brooks, there would be a build-up in pressure, which we are aware of and we are trying to deal with our current team. Unfortunately, at the moment, we're looking at advice from Welsh Government, which is recommending, I say unfortunately, it's a combination of it really being fortunate, but unfortunate for us as a council. They are looking to remove means testing on small and medium disabled facilities grants. Now, if the effect is what we expected to be after the pandemic, which is a sudden influx, I can tell you the team of officers I have working for me will not be able to cope with that workload. We have a very small team dealing with it. Were that number of cases to increase at the rate we expect them to, if it was to double, for example, the delays you're seeing now, which are pretty much caused by the fact people don't want people in their houses, contractors in their houses, would double as well because of the number of cases that would have to be dealt with. So I am very concerned. It's a matter I've actually raised as part of the council senior leadership team meetings around how we deal with this going forward. There doesn't appear to be any extra money from Welsh Government to deal with what's being suggested, albeit that the council will be able to take income from managing the process of dealing with the disabled facilities grant. So it is a bit of a concern, that one. It is something we are looking at, so it's not something that's exactly gone away, but it's an issue which has actually been compounded by virtue of changes from Welsh Government. So that's not a very satisfactory answer, I'm afraid, but it is where we are.
That's lovely. No, that's fine. It's just I'm glad that you actually got it and you've actually raised it higher up as well, because I think keeping it on the table, I think, is actually going to be quite important, because we don't know how this is all going to pan out to be. So, yeah, so no, that's fine. Thank you for that.
Thank you for that. Councillor Perks, I believe you have a question.
Yes, I just wondered if we could have an update on the 11 units being built in Court Road Depot, whether they're nearly at completion now. I know they've got to be completed by the 31st of March. And if they are nearly completed, we did talk about that we might be able to go and view the units as well before people move into them.
I think I lost my internet connection. I think it's doing the rounds. I think I caught the question. Are they ready for the end of March? And can members go and have a quick look at them before we occupy them? We have acknowledged that they will be nearly complete at the 31st of March. If I'm being truthfully honest, they won't be ready to occupy at the 31st of March, but they'll be nearly there. We've had some delays with one of the major utilities companies, so people would find it very difficult, and we'd be providing candles and to the dwellings. So we've caught the contractors caught back up as far as they can. We've made Welsh Government aware that we're likely to be a week or so late, we believe. And I gave a commitment at this scrutiny that we would invite scrutiny members, social distancing, of course, to have a look at the site and to have a look at the dwellings, which we will honour as soon as we're ready to allow visitors to the site.
Oh, thank you, Mike. That's good news that they're going to be completed soon.
Thank you. Does anybody else have any questions? I can't see any more hands up. No. Nobody indicating on screen or in the chat. Okay. I do have one question. And my question is regarding the targets. During this time of COVID, are we right to actually be setting them? That's basically my question. Is it fair?
Shall I answer that, Chair?
Yes, if you like.
Yeah, I think it's right. This council has a history of being aspirational, and we've debated this as a senior management team. We would hope that you will be fair if we fall a little bit short. But I think for us, we would like to continue to be aspirational. We're all functioning, maybe not in our offices as previously, but we're certainly trying to achieve exactly what we need to achieve. So all we would ask for is as you always have done in this committee, is your understanding if we perhaps fail through our best endeavours. So I would say, as the old saying, aim for the stars and get the moon or something to that effect. But I think it's important to still have aspirations. The public still rely on us. So I'm quite happy to have targets, but all I would ask that members perhaps don't remind me of how aspirational I've been too severely when I don't perhaps meet all of them, but we'll certainly do our best to.
As I said, I don't see any more questions up, any more hands up, or anybody indicating they want to speak. So what I will suggest is we just move a note. Is that okay? Everybody happy? I can see a few nods. I don't see anybody dissenting or disagreeing. So on to the next item. Thank you. And that will be item number 9, service plans and target setting to deliver the Vale of Glamorgan annual delivery plan. Again, Mike or Miles, whoever would like to lead on that. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. I'll do the easy bit. You can ask Mike the difficult questions when I finish. Essentially, nothing stands still in performance management. So what you've just heard me talk about in terms of Q3 is our performance against the annual delivery plan 2020-21, and it is what it says. It's an annual delivery plan, and it's renewed and updated. So this new plan takes into account the recovery actions. So the actions that we have put together to get ourselves out of this pandemic in terms of service delivery. So the annual delivery plan 2021-22 was endorsed by Cabinet at its meeting of the 8th of March and referred to all scrutiny committees for their consideration and approval. So you're able to comment on all aspects of the plan, but I'm specifically going to lead you to 2 service plans that have a large role in the remit of this committee. The first one is, and we're looking at Appendix A now. Appendix A is the document that holds all the service plans. So I mentioned before about the arrangements for governance, arrangements for essentially achieving our corporate plan targets through the annual delivery plan The mechanism for doing that is via the service plan. So we break all these things down into smaller chunks, essentially. So for this committee, we've got two significant service plans. One is the housing and building service plan, which starts for members on page 88. That's not the Adobe page number, that's the actual page number on the document itself. So it starts on page 88. And it details a number of actions, and these actions are aimed at achieving our elements of the annual delivery plan, again feeding into the corporate plan. As I say, we have 33 actions, and they go from page 93 to 100. So these are all housing and building related, as you'd imagine, because it's Mike's service plan. There are 9 corporate risks, and these are listed along with their respective mitigations on pages 101 to 104. And there are 6 service-specific risks, and these are detailed on page 105. And then the other document I just want to draw members' attention to is the SRS service plan. Slightly different, because the SRS governance arrangement is via a joint committee involving councillors from Bridgend, the Vale and Cardiff, but is scrutinised by this committee. So the SRS service plan, the Shared Regulatory Services service plan, is on page 133. That service plan has slightly less actions, 15 actions from page 138 to 141. 8 corporate risks, and these are listed with mitigations, pages 142 to 144. And 8 specific service risks, and these are detailed on 144. Now, Appendix B, which for me is not available via a tab in the Adobe report in the PDF. It's available as a link in the body of the report. It shows the proposed service improvement targets for each wellbeing objective council-wide. So it's a large old document, Appendix B. And Appendix C, again, for me, not available other than via the body of the report as a link, shows the service plan contributions specifically for this committee for the 2 service plans I've mentioned. So the SRS service plan and the Housing and Building Services Service Plan, aligned to this committee, as I say, but also aligned to the annual delivery plan and the strategic recovery priority. So essentially what we're trying to do is cross-reference everything in Mike's and Dave Holland's plan against those 2 heavy strategic documents, the annual delivery plan and the strategic recovery plan. So that's what you see in that document at Appendix C. So members are asked to review and endorse the reports and appendices and to provide any comments with recommendations to Cabinet. So we'll take any questions, Chair.
Thank you for that, Miles. I don't have any questions. Does anybody have their hand up? I can't see anybody's hand up. For some reason, the chat isn't loading. Can someone please tell me if there's anybody requesting anything in the chat?
Nothing in the chat, Chair, but Councillor Avia has just raised her hand.
Now that's now loaded. Sorry, internet has not been great tonight. It's kicked me out twice already. But yes, Julie, if you would like to ask your question, thank you.
Yeah, thank you. It's for Mike, really. With the one-stop shop, I know they got a hell of a lot on there, but would they be adding like neighbour disputes in that? Would they be able to deal with it? And also, if it's a private tenant, apart from going for the citizen advice, do we have officers that would deal with private tenants' neighbour disputes as well? Thank you.
Yeah, unfortunately, it's an area, the hub, which we know isn't open face to face at the moment. We're providing digital services with our third sector provider, Pobble. I know that our aspiration was that the hub would actually be multifaceted, multi-agency. So we would like to see, and we probably will do now that we're looking at how we provide services going forward, whether we all need to be in offices, whether we can be in remote offices, whether we can work at home, whether we'll be able at some stage to hot desk. The hub will become, I think, for anything housing and housing related, whether it be support, advice, you know, that will be the place that people will potentially go for first point of contact, Councillor Avia. In terms of nuisance, yes, our housing support providers do provide assistance and help already. So if there are issues around nuisance and they are in receipt of housing related support, yes, we would expect the third-party provider to assist our tenants or the private tenants with that. In terms of, for example, Safer Vale, again, you know, their remit is far and wide, not only covering issues around ASB and nuisance, but also issues around domestic violence and domestic abuse, given the position at the moment in the country, and obviously the heightened awareness of the legislation. And of course, we saw the Welsh Government yesterday, or was it this morning, talking about developments and enhancements with regard to responding to that. And I think the hub would be a great way of being able to do that, you know, in terms of providing that informal advice. But also in terms of the other work, the stuff that the team do around community cohesion as well, the Safer Vale team. So I could see an outreach basis for Safer Vale being there, because we often ask, you know, for example, with community safety, do people know what Safer Vale is and what it, you know, the community safety team, what do they deliver? You will have a report at your next meeting on from Safer Vale on the community safety strategy, which will give you a bit more information. But going back to your point, would I like to see other services and areas working out of the hub? Yes, I would. That would probably include, when we can, face-to-face, and would probably include partner agencies like CAB and others that may wish to provide some form of services directly from there.
Thank you. Can I just ask one other question? On page 105, the risk description, client budgetary pressures, does that mean, is that our housing maintenance department? It says client budgetary pressures impacting on the viability of the DSO trading account. Is that our maintenance department then?
Yes, it is. Not pressure on their budget. Because the building services operates as a trading account, we provide, like a contractor, we provide services to clients. And I think our concern and worry is most of our income is derived either from within the council or within housing. And obviously, over the last 12 months, there has been for the planning team, for example, there had been a drastic reduction in work being carried out that we would otherwise have had the opportunity to have been available for. And I think the worry for us going forward is if the council's budgets, you know, clearly the pandemic has to be paid for in the future somehow. As people have said, there's no magic money, you know, money tree. And whilst the settlement this year has been welcome, clearly we're not certain clearly what settlement the council will have in future years. If that has an impact clearly in terms of our ability to spend on capital projects or revenue repairs, for example, if the money's not available in our service department budgets, then it will have a direct knock-on effect to the viability of the trading account, because that's where our work comes from. Now, there are a couple of discussions ongoing at the moment around the trading account about whether we need a trading account or what that should look like. And I've been working with, and Miles have been working with Caris and Carolyn Michael and our accountants, looking at a future model for building services. We're not doing that piece of work at the moment because most of our accounting colleagues are struggling with year end and balancing the accounts and progressing the budgets for next year. But we're likely to start meeting towards the early summer to start looking at the impacts of where we think we're going to be, what levels of income we might expect going forward, and our capital programme. And I think we'll probably then be in a position to report back around what the future of the trading account or the operation of the DSO might look like. I've mentioned at an earlier meeting that clearly, I'm picking up on Marcus's point earlier, that you know, we've just had 12 months generally where our tenants who normally want to see our repairs team haven't wanted to see our repairs team as frequently as previously, and that's had an impact. Now, the trading account will will balance eventually, but obviously we will have to fund that trading position, and we will continue to do so because clearly our staff have been employed, whether they've been fully committed or not. And I think at the earlier revenue and capital report, Laura mentioned that we haven't been able to furlough our staff in the same way as perhaps the private sector. So we'll have to sort of meet those costs. But yeah, we'll look in the future. But in terms of client budgets, they are obviously a major concern and a major risk for us going forward.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Does anybody else have any questions? I don't have any questions on this particular item. I can't see anything in chat. Just loading to participants to see if anybody has their hand up in that one. No, and nobody is indicating on screen. So I think that brings an end to that agenda item, apart from the fact that we should move a note. Does everybody agree?
Yeah, happy to move a note.
Okay, and I can see Councillor Brooks and Councillor Perks nodding as well. Okay, so I don't have any items that agenda item 10 is items that Chairman has declared are urgent. I don't have anything. There's nothing under part 1 or part 2 that I think is urgent. So I think all I have to do now is to thank you all very much for coming, and thank you for your time tonight. It's much appreciated. And to remind you that the next meeting is Wednesday, the 14th of April at 6 p.m. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Chair.
Thank you.
Thank you, Chair.
Yeah.
Thank
you,
you.
Millie. Thank you, Chair.